The first thing I learned about forbidden desires is that they don't arrive making noise. They enter slowly, sit beside you, and pretend to be just curiosity. When you realize it, you've already given them too much space. I remember the exact day it all began, because nothing about that day seemed special, and maybe that's what makes it impossible to forget. It was my first week of college. I had gotten in earlier than most, not because of my parents' pressure, but because I was always too fast for my own time, too smart for small rooms, too curious to accept limits without questioning them. I was already of legal age, but I still carried that strange feeling of being ahead in life, like someone who skipped important chapters and now had to pretend everything was under control. I was sitting in the third row when he walked in. There was nothing cinematic about it. No wind, no dramatic silence. Just the dry sound of the door and his presence filling the space as if it had always belonged there. He was a professor, and that should have been enough to make me look away. It wasn't. He placed his books on the desk, adjusted his glasses, and wrote his name on the board. Firm letters, unhurried. When he turned around, his eyes scanned the room, until they rested on me for a second longer than necessary. That was it, the first mistake. Not because there was anything explicit, but because something was recognized. As if, unintentionally, we had realized there was a common language between us. The classes began, and I quickly understood why everyone in the hallways talked about him. He didn't teach subjects, he challenged certainties. He provoked ideas. He asked questions that didn't have easy answers. And I answered. I disagree, I said in one of the first classes, feeling all eyes turn in my direction. He stared at me, serious. Good, he replied. Explain why. I explained, I argued. I stood by every point. When I finished, he gave a slight smile. Not a gentle smile, an interested one. Very good, he said. Finally, someone who isn't afraid to think. From that day on, I was called on frequently. Not out of favoritism, I knew, but because he expected more from me. And I delivered. Always. In the hallways, our glances crossed too quickly to be casual. Sometimes he would find me in the library and comment on the books I was reading. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that could be used against us. But there was tension. The kind you don't touch, it just vibrates. My friend noticed it before I did. He had sat next to me since the first semester. He was always there. He always liked me more than he admitted. You talk about him differently, he said one night as we walked across campus. Differently how? Like someone trying to convince themselves they feel nothing. I laughed. I denied it. I lied to both of us. The provocations in class became almost a silent game. Sharp questions, calculated answers. Sometimes he would throw a challenge at me with just a look. Sometimes I would respond with a comment that made the whole room hold its breath. Until one day, he called me over after class. Do you have a minute? My heart beat too fast for something that should have been so simple. Of course, we were alone in the classroom. He talked about my performance, my potential, academic opportunities. All correct, all professional. But there was something in the way he watched me, as if he were choosing each word with excessive care. You are different, he finally said, stopping mid-sentence. Intellectually, I mean. I nodded, feeling the weight of the silence between us. When I left that room, I already knew something had changed. And changes like that never come alone. They demand a price. After that day, he called me over after class. Something silent began to exist between us. It wasn't a declared secret, but it was no longer just imagination either. It was as if we had crossed an invisible line, one of those that don't appear on the ground, but that you feel beneath your feet. I tried to act normally. I attended classes, took notes, and discussed theories as I always had. But now there was a second level to everything. Every question he asked seemed directed at me. Every answer I gave was loaded with something that wasn't on the syllabus. In the hallways, our encounters started to last a few seconds longer than acceptable. A good morning that came with a stare that was too firm. A comment about an article that sounded like an invitation, nothing explicit. Nothing anyone could point to and say, this is wrong. Still, my body understood before my head did. It was in the library that things truly started to get complicated. I was sitting at a secluded table surrounded by books when I felt his presence even before looking up. It was strange how I already recognized the way he occupied a space. Always studying, he said in a low voice. Always teaching, I replied, without thinking. He smiled, but not in that easy way. It was a restrained, almost tense smile. He sat across from me, maintaining the correct distance, the correct posture, the correct tone. But his eyes didn't follow the rules. We talked about research, about my academic future, about possible paths after graduation. And in the middle of the conversation, something slipped out. You shouldn't be here so early, he said thoughtfully. Why? Because people like you tend to get lost trying to grow up too fast. The sentence hung between us, heavy, too personal for simple advice. And people like you, I replied, tend to get lost trying not to feel anything. The silence that followed was long. Dangerous, he stood up first. I should go, he said. Before someone gets the wrong idea. Before we got the wrong idea. But it was already too late. My friend noticed the change almost immediately. He always noticed everything before I did, maybe because he was looking at me from the outside, while I was too busy living on the inside. You've been acting different, he said, as we walked across campus at dusk. Different how? Distracted, distant. And, smiling to yourself, I rolled my eyes. You're imagining things. He stopped walking. It's him, isn't it? My heart skipped a beat. Who? Your professor. I denied it too quickly. Don't be ridiculous, but he knew me. He knew my silences, my deflections, my rehearsed answers. This is going to end badly, he said. Very badly. I didn't want to listen. The accidental meetings began to happen. At the campus cafe, in the parking lot. At academic events. Always public, always brief. Always too intense for something that was supposed to be non-existent. Until one day he asked me to talk outside the university environment. Just a coffee, he said, in a neutral place. If you don't feel comfortable, we'll leave. I should have said no, but I accepted. We sat across from each other in a small coffee shop, far from campus. For the first time, he didn't seem like my professor. There was no blackboard, no books, no students. Just a man and a woman trying to pretend it was just a conversation. This can't continue, he said, fidgeting with his cup. Then why did you come? I asked. He looked up at me. And in that instant, honesty defeated self-control. Because I think about you more than I should. My chest tightened, me too. We didn't touch. There was no need. There was something almost cruel in that restraint, in that proximity that was never consummated. When we said goodbye, I was trembling. Not from fear, from anticipation. The messages started that night. Short, cautious, then longer, more personal. We talked about books, childhood, wrong choices. He never crossed the line, but he walked close enough for me to feel the heat. My friend found out, not from the messages. From my gaze, you're getting hurt, he said. And you're going to hurt him too. You don't understand, I replied. I understand better than you think. The tension grew too quickly. One night we met again. There was no more room for pretending. He tried to pull away, tried to be responsible, tried to be a professor. But it was too late for us to be just that. This will end my career, he said. And what about me? I asked. Will it end me too? Silence was the answer. When we finally kissed, it wasn't impulsive, it was inevitable. Loaded with everything that had been held back until then. Still, he pulled away first. If we continue, he said, there's no turning back. I knew, and yet I stayed. That night, I felt I had crossed a boundary that no longer existed just outside of me, now it lived inside. And the worst mistake was yet to come. After the night we kissed, nothing went back to its place. Not because anything had been said out loud, but because the silence between us changed its texture. It was no longer made of restraint, it was made of waiting. I tried to act normally in class, but now every word he said carried a new weight. When he talked about ethics, about limits, about irreversible choices, it was as if he were speaking directly to me. Or maybe to himself. Our gazes no longer avoided each other. They just disguised themselves. I felt the danger in everything. In the way he said my name. In the way he approached my desk to comment on an assignment. In the shift in his breathing when our fingers almost touched while exchanging a book. Nothing explicit. Everything too intense. My friend pulled away. Not all at once, not dramatically. It was gradual, like someone who realizes they've lost a silent battle. The messages became shorter, the invitations rarer. When I asked if everything was okay, he would say yes, but he never looked me in the eye. I knew he was suffering, and yet I couldn't stop. The encounter that changed everything happened on a rainy night. He sent me a simple message, "Can you talk?" He didn't ask where. He didn't explain why. And I went. His apartment was far from campus, discreet, too organized for someone living in internal conflict. When I walked in, I felt the weight of the decision even before I closed the door. "You shouldn't be here," he said, almost in a whisper. "Then why did you call me?" I replied. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "Because I can't pretend this isn't happening anymore." There was no rush. No uncontrolled impulse. What there was recognition. Like two people who knew exactly the size of the mistake and still decided to walk through it hand in hand. When we were finally together, it wasn't like in easy novels. It was intense, restrained, almost painful. There was desire, yes, but there was also guilt, fear, awareness. Every gesture carried the question we didn't want to answer: what comes next? We slept little, almost not at all. Lying side by side, staring at the ceiling as if the silence could absolve us. "This can't continue," he said, before dawn. "I know," I replied, but neither of us moved. In the following days, the tension mixed with something dangerous: normality. We started seeing each other more often, always off campus, always hidden. We weren't reckless, we were too careful. And maybe that was the mistake. My friend found out that same week. Not because he saw us together. Not because someone told him. But because he had known me since before I learned to lie so well. "You slept with him," he said, direct, without preamble. I didn't answer, I didn't have to. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time his voice trembled. "You destroyed everything." "It wasn't like that," I tried to explain. "I'm of age. It was my choice." "It was never just about age," he replied. "It was about power, do you know that?" I denied it, I defended myself. I got angry. I said he was jealous, that he didn't understand, that he was exaggerating. But every word he said found an uncomfortable echo inside me. "He's going to lose everything," my friend said. "And so will you?" "You wouldn't do that," I replied. "Not to him." He stared at me for a long moment. "I would do it for you." That night, I met my professor again. I told him about the conversation, about the veiled threat, about the fear that was starting to grow. "This is over," he said decisively, "today." "It can't just be over," I replied. "Do you think this is easy for me?" "It's not about being easy," he said. "It's about what's right." The word right hurt more than any accusation. We tried to stay away for real. We went days without seeing each other, without messages, without excuses. I dove into my studies. He became even more rigid in class, even more distant. It was as if we were being watched all the time, and maybe we were. Then came the complaint. It wasn't public. It wasn't immediate. It was silent, bureaucratic, devastating. An internal investigation, formal summons. Questions that seemed harmless but were loaded with traps. He came to me that night, pale. "Someone talked," he said. "They're investigating." My stomach sank. "It was him," I whispered. He closed his eyes, I know. In that moment, I realized it no longer mattered what we felt. The system didn't care about feelings. Only about rules. And we had broken one of the most important ones. "Are you going to deny it?" I asked. "I can't lie," he answered. "And I won't drag you down with me." I cried. I begged. I promised silence, but everything was already out of control. When he came out of that last meeting, I knew from his look, it was over. Not arrested. Not yet. But removed. Suspended. Marked. And the worst was yet to come. I knew it was all over before anyone officially told me. There's a type of silence that doesn't ask for an explanation, it simply imposes itself. That's how I realized there was no turning back. He didn't show up for class that week. At first, the students whispered, as they always do when something breaks the routine. Some said he was sick. Others that he had traveled. No one imagined the full truth, because the truth is rarely comfortable enough to circulate in academic hallways, I knew. sitting in the same chair as always. I stared at the empty board and felt a weight in my chest that came not just from guilt, but from absence. It was strange to realize how someone could disappear so quickly from a space that once seemed dominated by their presence. My friend didn't speak to me. He passed by me as if I were invisible. There were no more accusations, no discussions, no attempts to convince me of anything. Just distance. A cold, determined distance, as if he had done what he believed was his duty and was now paying the emotional price for it. When they finally called me to talk to the administration, I was already exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. The questions came carefully, technically, almost gently. They wanted to know when it started. If there was pressure, if I felt harmed. If I understood the seriousness of the situation. I answered everything with the truth that fit in that space, and edited truth without emotion, without details, without us. It was consensual, I said, my voice firm. Did you feel coerced at any point? No, they took notes. Thanked me, said I could go. When I left that room, I was sure of one thing. No one there was interested in understanding feelings. They just wanted to solve an institutional problem. And we were the problem. He called me that night. It's official, he said bluntly. I've been suspended. My whole body went cold. For how long? Indefinite. They're talking about permanent dismissal. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Don't say that, he replied. I made choices. I knew the risks. If I hadn't... No, he interrupted. Don't turn this into one-sided blame. I was the responsible adult. I should have stopped it. That sentence broke me more than any punishment. We met one last time. Not in hidden cafes, not in silent apartments. On a park bench in broad daylight, like two ordinary people who needed to say goodbye. He looked different, older. Not physically, but in his eyes. Like someone who has lost something invisible yet essential. I'm leaving town, he said. It makes no sense to stay. And us? I asked, even though I knew the answer. He took a deep breath. We existed in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wanted to say I loved him. I wanted to ask him to stay. I wanted to promise that everything would be worth it in the future. But some words, when spoken, only increased the pain. So we stayed silent. Before he left, he held my hand for a moment, the last permitted touch. Don't let this define who you are, he said. You are so much more than this mistake. Mistake, the word echoed in me for weeks. My parents found out shortly after. Not from the university, from my behavior. From my silence, from the way I avoided any conversation about college. There were no shouts, no scandal. There was disappointment, and that's much harder to bear. You will not contact him again, my father said firmly. Under any circumstances, I nodded. I had no strength to argue. My friend showed up at my door days later. I didn't do this to hurt you, he said. I did it because someone had to stop it. I know, I replied. He looked tired. Do you hate me? I thought for a few seconds. No, but it will take me a while to understand everything. He nodded as if accepting a sentence. The semester ended without him. Another professor took over the course. The content was the same, the words too. But nothing had life anymore. Sometimes I would look for him in the hallways out of habit, forgetting that he was no longer part of that world. Other times, I remembered him in books, in sentences, and ideas that would never be discussed between us again. We never spoke again. There was no reunion years later. No romantic redemption, no happy ending disguised as maturity. What there was silence, and learning. Today, when someone asks me about mistakes, I don't talk about bad grades or impulsive choices. I think of him, I think of me. I think of how love, when born in the wrong place, doesn't stop being love, but it still destroys. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all. Because not all forbidden feelings are false, but almost all of them come at too high a price.